So today, Apple had their event in New York City, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on it. I'm not really going to roll off the specs because actually, we're going to be building these things, okay? We're going to be building these things. It's also the reason why you can't see me in this particular video. I'm going to be doing a lot of zooming in, and so I didn't figure there would really be much of a point to having me on camera for this one. I will be for the next one, though, because the next video is going to be my experience with the iPhone XR. I'm hoping to get to local Best Buy sometime later this week to actually have some hands-on time with the thing and see what I think of it, because I'm very seriously looking at putting it on my holiday wish list. So, MacBook Air. A couple of things on the outside that I personally really like. First of all, I love the new design. It is reminiscent of the 12 or 13-inch, 13-inch MacBook Pro non-touch bar variant, but you'll notice something. Up here in the upper right-hand corner, above the, for those of you who cannot see, above the delete key and immediately to the right of F12, your volume up key, and immediately to the left of the right speaker grill. So if you have a 13-inch MacBook Pro, you probably already know where this is going. You will feel a square of a smooth glass texture. Have you guessed? Touch ID. The new MacBook Air, I almost said Pro, excuse me. The new MacBook Air has Touch ID on board. They've got a third generation of their butterfly keyboard. They've managed to give it a Force Touch trackpad. 12 or 13 hours of battery life. That 13 hours was specifically highlighted with iTunes movie playback for some reason. 2 USB-Cs on the left and headphone on the right. But there's one thing that stood out to me about this MacBook Air more than anything. Apple have managed to find a way, to take the shavings that come off of the assembly line when they build these things, the aluminum shavings, take those, use them, along with other recycled sources, I'm sure, recycled aluminum sources. This computer is the first notebook by Apple to be made out of 100% recycled aluminum. So let's build one. So let's see. This would be if it were my money, okay? So I'm not going to go for the top of the line because I honestly don't think that I need it. And I'm also going to be comparing it to the $15.99 that my iMac cost when I bought it about 3 years ago. So just for kicks, just to be different, I'm going to select gold. And let's go with this, picked the wrong one. Let's go with this one, the gold. This one's got the 1.6 gigahertz dual core i5. Retina display. That's the other really big thing about this. They've got a Retina display on a MacBook now. 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gig SSD. We're going to upgrade that. Touch ID, Force Touch trackpad, 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, which are in the shape of USB-C. So, we're going to keep the memory the same. Storage. Let's see what we can do. So we could do 1.5 terabytes. I do have 1 terabyte on my iMac, but to be honest, I don't think I'm ever going to use that much. I've had this thing for 3 or 4 years, and I'm still at like 800 gigabytes of free space. So let's be a little more reasonable. I'm going to configure this with 512 gig of storage. That brings it to exactly $15.99. Okay, so $15.99, 8 gigs of memory. This is of LPDDR3 RAM, for those of you who are interested, running at 2.1 gigahertz, 512 gig of SSD storage. I think it's rather interesting that this MacBook Air is configurable with up to 1.5 terabytes, but if I go ahead and do that, let's go ahead and select that just for the sake of argument here. So if I go ahead and do that, that brings the price up to, where did you go, price tag? Excuse me while I try and regain my sense of orientation here. I'm completely lost. Where are you? Where are you? Shit. My apologies for the language. Where is it? Had it, then I lost it. Let me zoom out for a moment. Oh, there it is. So check this out. Again, terabyte of storage, 8 gigs of RAM, $2,399. Just for the sake of argument, let's keep going. I'll say the terabyte of storage and the 16 gigs of RAM. You can actually put 16 gigs of RAM in a MacBook Air. Given that the MacBook Air is now the middle-of-the-road system in their notebook lineup, because you got the MacBook, then the MacBook Air, and the MacBook Pro. I think with this being the middle-of-the-road lineup, I think configuring it to $25.99 all the way to the top is a bit silly, to be honest. As I said, if it were my money, I'd probably go for the 512 gig. Speaking of silly, well, actually, it's not so silly. What do you think this looks like? External hard drive? NAS? Network attached storage device? What do you think? It's actually, and for those of you who probably read the tab, but probably gave it away already, but for those of you who couldn't see the writing on the tab but can still see the picture fairly well, what you've got here is a pile of 5 Mac Minis. Brand new from the ground up. These things are beasts. Okay? Oh, one more thing. Both the MacBook Air and Mac Mini both have a T2 security chip. That's how they're able to get the Touch ID to work. Pay attention to that, though, because on the Mac Mini, it's a little bit odd. And I'll show you why in a moment. This thing is a beast. 64 gigabytes of RAM. 2 terabytes of onboard storage. And apparently a lot of the people like to take these and turn them into servers, which, I mean, that's been around for at least, I'm going to say at least 10 years, maybe more. The Mac Mini hasn't been shown much love lately, but I think they did the right thing by really tricking it out. Let's go ahead and build one. Let's go ahead and build one. So buy Mac Mini. Okay. So just for the sake of argument, both of these are way too much for me personally. I don't see myself ever making use of the full speed of the 3.6 gigahertz processor. Turbo boost up to 4.1. But just for the sake of argument, let's go ahead and compare this again to the iMac that I'm currently recording this video on, okay? So, you got an i5 and 8 gigs of RAM. That's about right. I think, what does my iMac have? Hold on. .7 gigahertz i5. Yep, that's about right. So this one's got a 3.2 or a 3 gigahertz. You can configure it up to 3.2. What shall I do? So here we are, terabyte of storage. That brings the pricing to $16.99. So it's $100 more expensive than the iMac that I'm recording this on. However, if you hook up an HDMI cable to it and you have a little bit of know-how, I don't know exactly how you go about this, but supposedly after the initial setup, you don't need a monitor to run this if you're a voiceover user. But again, just for the sake of argument and laughs, let's go ahead and do 2 terabytes of SSD storage and the full 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM. What does that bring us to? Oh, you're going to love this. $3,899. The Mac Mini starts at $799. The MacBook Air, excuse me, I forgot to mention, starts at $1199. And yet, look at this. You can configure this thing up to almost $4,000. A Mac Mini. This originally started life, if you remember, for those of you who don't remember, the Mac Mini's been around since '06 as a computer, going through its different iterations over the years. But initially, when the Mac Mini was first conceived, it was conceived as a switcher Mac. Nowadays, this thing is a server in a tiny little toaster box. It's crazy. Now, I mentioned a moment ago this thing has a T2 chip. Why do I find that strange? Because I looked in the accessories and they don't yet have a keyboard with a Touch ID sensor on board. I just find that interesting. I would think that if you're going to give this a Pro desktop, if you're going to give a Pro desktop some really neat features, it'd be nice to have the touch bar from the MacBook Pro. Now, for those of you who are going to bash me in the head and shoot me with a gun and say, hey, wait a moment, that touch bar is absolutely useless. Actually, for people who are low vision or have no vision, the touch bar is one of the greatest things to ever happen. Why? Because, among other things, I've actually tried the touch bar with VoiceOver, okay? It gives you much, much more control, more direct control over things like websites, your volume control, easy access to emoji. Okay, these are things that would not normally be easily accessible to us. We'd have to go scrolling through. We'd have to first find the appropriate section of things like Facebook Messenger or iMessage, and have to go in and look through. Whereas on the touch bar, you can easily just swipe your finger across and scan much faster, in my opinion. And also, you have to remember, I came from a generation where we didn't necessarily have the ability to select our characters, our emojis. We had to type them out by hand. And because of that, I'm familiar with some of the typing, but some of the younger people out there might not be. So it'd be nice to have a touch bar desktop keyboard. But I think the thing that really sold the show this morning was the new iPad Pro. This thing, if you thought the Mac Mini was a beast, this is even crazier. So check this out. In front of me is, on the left, my current iPad Pro. On the right, the new iPad Pro. These are the 12.9-inch models. This thing is nuts. They basically shaved away all the bezel, okay? There is no home button. So now you've got Face ID, but they managed to get the Face ID to work in any orientation. I think that might include upside down, but I don't know. But what's super, super cool about this thing is they said this thing has got graphics akin to an Xbox One S. I don't care about that. What I care about is if you're on the road, because they're saying this thing is the best computer, it's outsold PC notebooks, and it's as powerful as an Xbox One desktop class. Okay, if you're going to tout that, you're thinking, okay, I could take my iPad Pro on the road with me. Great computer. This is genuinely what I'm thinking here, okay? And you're thinking, oh, great, I've only got one adapter. What do I do? Well, you can charge your iPhone with this thing. Okay, there's a USB-C port on the bottom. Yes, you heard me correctly, USB Type-C. They ditched Lightning. They also ditched the headphone jack, which I don't know how I feel about that. Partially because I don't know where I could pick up a mono earbud without having to go to the AirPods. And since Apple's rumored to be redesigning those, I don't want to be too hasty and jump the gun. To be honest, I'm not going to be jumping on the gun on this anytime soon anyway, so But, so 12.9 inches, A12X Bionic. This is insane. This is genuinely insane. And it's about to get even crazier because you can get the 11-inch or a 12.9-inch. Now, the 11-inch, if you have a 10.5-inch iPad Pro, or maybe the 9.7-inch iPad, I don't know how close those two are in size comparison, that's basically the size of the 11-inch iPad Pro. This is the one I'd personally be going for because it's not too much of a screen reduction, but it's a major, major footprint reduction, much easier to travel with. So again, if this were my money, so let's go ahead and configure. It starts at $799, 11 inches. Now I'm going to go for the silver because if you guys were around when the original iPad was released, tell me this doesn't look like the what the original iPad would be like today, okay? If you were to cut off the bezels of the original iPad and shave away the home button, tell me these two wouldn't look similar, okay? So just for kicks, let's say 64 gigs, and the reason is because my current iPad Pro has 32, so 64 would be a nice jump, especially considering I would be going for the Wi-Fi plus cellular. And why is that? Because I don't trust hotel hotspots, and it's nice to have the instant connectivity that I could use, like, without having to worry about airport hotspots, again, hotel hotspots, Starbucks. It's just easier and just something I'd like to have. $949. Now, $949 for a slate computer. Now, yes, I did just call this a computer. The iPad is a computer. Think about it. You can do your basic tasks. You can, using the App Store, you can download anything. Heck, they're even giving this thing Photoshop. Starting next year, you can get no frills, no holds barred. Excuse me, I said no frills. No holds barred. Everything included. No joke. Photoshop on this thing. And there's some really cool AR stuff that they're planning on that they showed off with the Adobe Aero software. I'm very interested in what this could mean for accessibility. Whether or not you could take your iPad and move it around. Now, yes, you'd look like an idiot, but but let's consider this. If you're somebody who prefers, or more precisely would need something like the 12.9-inch screen or the 11-inch screen versus a 5.5, if you're trying to get a good idea of your surroundings, you could take your iPad Pro, move it around, and software could tell you, to your left is such and such building, directly in front of you is such and such, over to the right is, this intersection. And all you have to do is just hold up the thing. That would be genuinely very, very cool. The other thing that's very cool is they've redesigned the Apple Pencil. Right along the right-hand side of the tablet here is a magnetic connector. Said magnetic connector charges the Apple Pencil and holds it in place. Just incredible. So again, $949. That's what I'd personally configure. Okay, but let's again, for the sake of argument, change this up. Okay, so let's say we go for the 12.9-inch display. That immediately bumps it to $1149 for the 64 gig Wi-Fi plus cellular. But watch this. I'm going to go for. You heard me correct. For those of you who cannot see, I've got my mouse hovering over a very special option. 1 terabyte of flash storage in an iPad. Dude! $1,749. I am genuinely lost for words here. I cannot speak. This is insane. This is insane. $1,749. And that was for the Wi-Fi only version. Note that we went the Wi-Fi plus cellular route. $1,899. Okay? $1,899 for an iPad. Now here's my question. Who among us out there wants to take a guess as to whether or not this configuration of the iPad Pro could eat into the MacBook Pro sales? Anybody want to venture a guess? I personally don't want to say yes or no, because the MacBook Pro, I'm sure, has a lot of advantages, things like a built-in keyboard, better graphics, that sort of thing. But the iPad Pro, on the other hand, has things like the cellular connectivity, which is 24/7, cellular, like internet access, right? But at the same time, if that's what you're primarily after, I think the $1,899 iPad Pro is a bit too much. I would personally go again for the base configuration, the 64 gig, which is a much more reasonable $949. That's like $1,000 cheaper. I don't know what to think personally about that. $1,900 for a Mac, for an iPad Pro, and like $2,000, or excuse me, $3,000, almost $4,000 for a Mac Mini. Okay? Wow. Apple's trying to get back into the creative market, and I think that this is genuinely a good step in the right direction. But wow, just wow. Now it'll be interesting to see how many people buy the Mac Mini for its server capabilities. I'd really be interested in seeing that. And I'm also, again, interested in seeing whether or not the iPad Pro eats into some of the MacBook Pro sales. All that said, I haven't mentioned too much about the MacBook Air. It's definitely a good redesign. I like what they've done with it. But compared to the iPad Pro and the way things are going, I think personally for leisure computing, again, leisure computing, it'll be interesting to see which of these two does better, the MacBook Pro or the MacBook Air or the iPad Pro. You know? I just don't know. But it was just a big day today from Apple, and I'm very excited to see how this year plays out and how things do. So good luck to Apple with all this. This is fantastic and insane. Thank you for watching. Comments are welcome, and have a nice day.